don't be afraid of your shitty first draft. Literally, you can't be, because it is going to be shitty. You can't edit a blank page. Like, there's so many of those that we hammer into young writers. And I think the point of it is because it's true. You just have to go. It is a scary thing. It is a terrifying, gut-wrenching, vulnerable spilling thing to put your words into ink. But I will hold your hand while I say this. Have to do it.
Welcome to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, a formerly repressed creative soul turned fiction writer, story editor, and author accelerator certified fiction book coach. At Write It Scared, we tell the truth about why writing a novel is so hard by acknowledging that most writers grapple with two stories: the one they want to put on the page to the best of their ability, and the often subconscious internal story that prevents them from doing it. This show is designed to help you identify and rewrite the internal narrative holding you back while you discover and write the story you want to tell and learn all the tools to help you do that successfully. Join me each week for a new episode where we'll talk about writing to deepen our understanding of the craft and of ourselves as writers. Writing a novel is an inside job that we do not do alone. Welcome to Write It Scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hey, writer. Welcome back to another episode of the Write It Scared podcast, where we talk about the brave and messy act of writing our novels so that we can do it with more confidence and more clarity and know that we're not so alone in the madness of it all. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, and today I'm in conversation with fantasy author A.M. Deese, and she's talking to us about the process of writing her dynamic fantasy series, The Dance of the Elements, and how she approaches her world building. And though our conversation leans heavy into writing fantasy and building magic systems, world building is not just for writers of speculative or historical fiction. Regardless of genre or setting, every novelist needs to world build. And it can be a huge topic, and we can spend forever hammering out the details and get really mired down in that part of the process. So if that's an issue for you, I want to help you streamline it. I created a free world building guide called Worldbuilding Simplified that will take you through a series of strategic questions to help you approach your world building process more systematically so that you gain clarity and not get so distracted by nuance. So think of it this way. You'll start with that spark of the idea you have for your story and treat it as a seed that you plant in the soil of your imagination, and then you water it with these questions. So you'll start a bit wide and then narrow your focus as you go, as you also give yourself time and the creative headspace to do your dreaming and do your research. So you can find that link in the show notes. And the world building is a colossal topic. Remember, it really just boils down to a couple of things: relationship and impact. How will your characters be in relationship to their world? And what impact will that have on them as they go after their story goals? All right, so now let me give you Alexis's bio, and then we will jump into her interview. Alexis Marrero Deese is passionate about fantasy and publishes magical stories for children and young adults under the name A.M. Deese. Her favorite authors include Brandon Sanderson, Jacqueline Carey, and Robin Hobb. She graduated from the University of South Florida with a bachelor's degree in creative writing and is the author of The Dance of the Elements and Tales of a Sixth Grade Werecat series. She also publishes adult romantasy under the pen name Lexi Lopez. When she isn't writing, Alexis is probably cooking an elaborate feast, riding unicorns, slaying monsters, or simply curled up with a good book. Hi, Alexis. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you, Stacey, for having me.
Wonderful. Well, I already gave the listeners a bit of a bio, but would you please share a bit more about your journey to becoming a writer and a published author with our audience?
I love that you use the word journey, because that's definitely the best way to describe it. I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer. And I mean, always, like from the time I was like a baby girl, like drawing pictures with yellow legal pads showing people the stories that I wrote. When it came time to actually learn how to get the stories that are in your head, into like full-blown books that you can actually publish, there were a lot of steps of learning just how to get the words on page. And then after that happened, it progressed into kind of okay, well, now I have to get a query letter together so that I can get an agent. So that was where I started. But I heard of a thing called PitMad, and it is a tradition they did on Twitter, now X. And basically, you could put a quick little elevator pitch to an agent or a publisher directly. And if they retweeted and liked your pitch, it was an invite for you to then query to them. So I was able to get a small publisher and a deal. I was like through the moon excited. This was back in, I think, 2017, maybe 2016. It was a whole other new journey, just like kind of figuring out like how to work with an editor. Because prior to this, I had only exchanged stories with friends and other co-writers that I'd met in like classes or Facebook or something. So that was a journey too, but we had a finished product and I loved it. I loved the original covers, but as sometimes happens, the series was released from the publisher after 2 years or after well, maybe 3. I'm not sure. Anyways, I digress. The point is I got the rights back, which is sometimes a battle for some people. So I was happy to be able to get full rights back and able to then republish. I had a choice to query again, but I had kind of learned a little bit of the process of publishing, and at this point self-published Tales of a Sixth Grade Werecat, which is a middle grade adventure. And so I decided to give it a try, and I did a re-release, and now we've got Ignited, Submerged, and Windswept all available under the Dance of the Elements series, and fourth and final one is upcoming.
And that's so amazing. So do you remember the pitch that you shared?
I honestly don't remember it. The basic gist was that in a world where water is currency, Jura must use her wits to survive. And I said it was Graceling meet Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I think the comps were interesting comps. And then, with the actual full-on blurb that I was able to send out with my query letter, which that was an evolution too. I mean, the original query letter that I wrote to the one that got me to a publishing deal to even to what's on the back of the book now has just changed so much.
Oh, yeah. I remember you describing it to me one time as Game of Thrones meets Airbender.
Yes.
I was like hooked.
It definitely has the political intrigue and that sort of like the backstabbing in the palace, the secrets and the betrayals. And then, of course, it has the elemental magic, which I am a huge fan of.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that today. So the series that we've been talking about that you introduced us to is called Dance of the Elements. And I think you said currently there are 3 books, Ignited, Submerged, and Windswept, and they are in order. And this is a dynamic series, right? You have to read it. It needs to go in order.
Exactly. There is a little bit of recap if you happen to skip a book, but it's told, just throughout contextual clues and bits of dialogue throughout the prose. There has been a little bit of a gap in years between books 3 and 4. I am going to print a synopsis at the beginning of the book, just because I myself know as a avid reader, it gets confusing, all the worlds and like where you left off. So I plan to have like a previously on so you can kind of catch yourself on it.
That's such a good idea. And I enjoy that too. If I've been waiting for a series for, a final book in a series. For example, like if the last book in the Game of Thrones ever comes out, I'm going to need a synopsis. So you told us a little bit about the hook for this series, but tell us a little bit more about what it's about and what drew you to write it.
What drew me to write it, and then I'll circle into what it's about, is I love to tell stories that show you all the different sides of the choices that someone made. I really love stories that show a blend of characters of different ages, how everyone kind of works together. So in this world, I've got this weird politics. There's these 13 rulers, and they all have votes in this council. And if you're the first of the rulers, that means you're like the top dog. And it goes down in rank and you get less and less votes. It's a very savage world. They're able to kill one another and had no repercussions for it. And this is all done because you're trying to either gain rank, rank would be one of the 13, or move up in rank. So if the 6th dies mysteriously, then the person who is 7th gets to move into the next spot, and so on. So when we join this story, we are meeting the daughter of the first. The first has mysteriously gone missing. The daughter is kind of trying to step into this role to not show how vulnerable she is to the rest of the council members. You know, she has to appear strong, not only to keep her family's rank, but to keep her very life. So she is kind of desperate, and her only thought of any other source of power outside of the 13 is that of the shadow dancers. And they're just this like secret group of like assassins. So she happens to have one in her prison. So she decides that she's going to break him out and make him help her. So her and Tylak have an unsteady alliance. And while all this is happening, you also meet Bashar. He is one of the 13. He's actually the 10th. And he's probably one of my very favorite characters. He's morally gray, a bit corrupt, but also just weirdly good at times and very smart. He's smarter than I am. I joke with people all the time. I really struggle when I'm writing his scenes because I'm like, he's too smart to get in that situation. Like, he would know what to do, and I'll have to fix and edit him. And then my other 2 characters that I adore are Ash and Kay. Ash is a retired fire dancer in this land where water is currency and the desert is all. They force anyone who had any sort of fire-wielding magic to battle dragons in the arena. And this is all done primarily for the entertainment of the 13. Kay is a little 7-year-old firebending prodigy who gets thrown into this whole mix of politics just because she's really good at bending fire. And then everyone kind of converges, and you realize that the politics of the palace are corrupting the arena, which is kind of in turn corrupting the entire world. And I was smart enough and book savvy enough to kind of figure out what she needs to do to kind of stop all that.
Wow. And Kay was one of my favorite characters.
I adored Kay, and what's funny is in the creation process, she actually was not a POV character. She was just someone who was in there, and then I just was loving her sass, and I was like, no, we need more of her. And then there's more and more chapters, and then she actually has her own little novella, too, that you can get. It's called Fetch the Flame. But yeah, she's a great character.
Yeah. So this is a huge, expansive series with multiple POVs.
Yes.
There's a tremendous amount of world building that goes into this story. So, and it has this robust magic system too. So could you share a little bit of what your world building process is like?
I really like taking what magic idea you have and seeing it in maybe ways that haven't been explored for far enough, or ways that are, unique and different. So, for instance, in my elemental magic world, yes, I have them that, they can move fire, but then I also have certain ones that can move the fire source itself, and in doing so can actually embody dragons. And there's also the subversion of that, which is the shadow dancers, who in their own way are manipulating light and heat and making themselves appear invisible. So I kind of just like exploring all the different ways that the magic can be used. And I guess whenever I'm developing new stories, it, for me anyways, always starts with the magic. I know some writers start with character or a certain scene, but for me, I'd always start with the magic. And it kind of just comes from a what if.
Are there any best practices that you adhere to or try to follow along with when it comes to building a magic system?
It's an oldie and goodie. I like to stand by the magic should have some sort of price. And it doesn't have to be like a physical price. Sometimes you see it took a bit of energy, or it could be like a physical thing that got used and burned up. But whatever it is, I think there should be some sort of rules or limitations set to it. And I think that's what makes it more real.
So as far as writing a series like this, one that is dynamic, it's pretty fluid. One piece of the story flows into the next, flows into the next. What have been the challenges that have come up in doing that?
I definitely use my series Bible and my style sheet heavily. And those are tools, I think, that if you don't have them as you're starting, especially a larger series, it's something that you do want to get started. I regret that I didn't do that from the start, because there's been, moments where I've caught myself, or my editor or my beta reader has been like, hey, can't they do this? Didn't happen actually with the Ignited series, but in my Werecat series, I had forgotten that like one of the little rat characters, he can talk, and I forgot he could talk. And I was like, oh, he's allowed to talk. So it's just, I think you really have to not only remind yourself of the lore, but hold yourself accountable to it. Like you created these rules, and once you did, their canon. So, make sure that you have those references that you can go back to as you're creating more.
And how do you go about creating a story Bible?
So it's funny because I've actually had a lot of people ask about my series Bible, and I just feel like it's like the most basic little thing. It's not even like formatted on like an Excel or anything. It's literally a binder. I'm a terrible habit of like writing scrap notes whenever I get ideas. I'm trying to get better and put them on like a Keep Notes app so I can, just email them to myself. But in the meantime, I've got all these little like scrapbooks of like scenes or something that I know I need to add into this next edit that I'm doing. So those all get stuck in there. But I also have like print-ups of a list of characters, maybe like a final idea that I had for a specific character. Like, I'm not sure exactly where this scene fits in, but this has to happen to him or her at this point. So that'll be in there in a little bit of detail. And then I try to include all the things that I know I'm going to forget, like the minor characters. If I mentioned glowing green eyes, we'll make sure that they have green eyes later, so those are mentioned as well. Outside of that, I guess I also include just some of the like overarching like plot points that I want to include in the series as a whole. And then I also try to see if there's any like dangling plot threads from from the first in book. So from Ignited, I want to make sure that if something was brought up, it was brought up for a reason. So especially as I'm finishing up this fourth book, I want to make sure that everything is settled.
Yeah. And you mentioned a style sheet. Do you want to tell us what that is?
So style sheet is a tool that is created by your editor typically, and a great reference sheet. So at its bare minimum, it's going to include your main character names, any made up words or languages that you might have, any sort of like things that are unique to your story specifically. For instance, if you're saying someone that is a burner, if that means something more specific to just someone who's burning a piece of wood. So you would have that with like that explanation. And then it would just kind of have a reference, like if it is a series and there's unanswered questions, there'll be like those included in there as well. Just, it's kind of like a series Bible, I guess, but just more like with the editor in mind. So it's like an easy link for them, but also for you yourself, the author, to reference.
So it's kind of part of the dictionary, or the.
That's a great way to phrase it. But yeah, like the book's dictionary.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing more about your series, The Dance of the Elements, and how you go about approaching world building and looking at magic systems and how that comes forward for you. And I love that you said that it comes from the magic first. Like that is the thing that you love. And I know, I know you're one of the most brilliant world builders I have ever met. Seriously. Yeah. Side note, backstory. Alexis and I we know each other.
I've never met her before.
This may or may not make it into the podcast. All right, well, let's transition because a big part of this podcast is dedicated to telling the truth about why writing can be so hard and exposing the unhelpful narratives that many of us writers face when we craft our stories. And so these are the internal voices that say, you're not good enough. It's not good enough. It's never going to be good enough. Or, it was already done, or so-and-so did it better, those kind of things. And so the reason that I bring this up is that I want to identify them, normalize them so that it helps more people work through those doubts so that they keep writing, because that's what makes you grow in confidence, is doing the thing.
Absolutely.
And because of that, we'll get more stories in the world from people
Which can only
we
be a
not
good
have
thing.
heard from. So that's the point. So given all of that, will you share a time when you struggled with the writing and you maybe wanted to give up, or you thought you'd never figure something out? And would you share what it was like, and then what helped you move through it?
There's honestly, this is sad, but also hopefully encouraging. There have been so many struggles in writing. I think we are all us writers crazy to some degree, because it's very, I don't even know. It's a part of yourself that you leave. So it makes you very vulnerable throughout the entire process. You're sharing your words, you're putting yourself out there in marketing, you're putting yourself up there for rejection when you put out your query letters. So there really have been so many stories. Even before I got PitMad, I was accepted by another small publisher and so excited. But they were open for like 8 months. And all of a sudden they went under. And I mean, I had never signed a contract even with them, really. I mean, I did, but there was no there was no scheduled publication. Like, they were just getting up off their feet. And it was a new business. So, I mean, I get how it struggled, but that was to feel at one, point that I was getting published finally, to then kind of realizing a month later, 2 months later, that it wasn't going to happen. But it was actually one of the people that I met through that publisher that told us, or that mentioned to others, that the PitMad Fest was happening. And so because of that, it was, a window opened, or how they say. So really, it just comes down to wanting it more than not having it, I guess. So just wanting it more than not having it. Keep putting it out there.
Do you ever struggle with procrastination, or
every day? I think the procrastinating, especially for me, I'm blessed that I get to just work at home and make my own schedule to write and do as I please. And it's really hard to first make yourself sit down for an actual writing session, and put away the media distractions, or the friends, or the pets, or whatever it is that you're trying to stay away from. I really love using timed writing sprint. If I give myself a set, not even a word count, it's like I'm going to do at least one 20-minute writing sprint for the day. Chances are I'm going to knock out at least 100 words, if more, but at least it gets your butt in the chair and makes you actually do something.
I love that. Yeah, writing sprints are a go-to for me also, especially when I'm drafting. I haven't really figured out how to use them in revision. Do you know?
No, it's hard. And revision is a whole other baby, I feel like, because that one, you take the time away from the story after you're literally sleeping and breathing it. And then you look away from it, and then you bring it back, and you kind of love it, but you also kind of hate it. So it's this weird relationship that you have with it now at this point. I like to read out loud and then just kind of, accept if I'm getting actual feedback from copy editor or line editor at this point. I kind of just accept that they know what they're talking about and lean toward what I can do to make what they said make sense in my world. Because, you're not going to just drop everything and change it because they said a question. You're just going to say, how did I not answer that question earlier? So you just kind of look back and oftentimes it's in the beginning of the story where you kind of need to fix something.
Right. Usually when I work with writers and they're struggling with something, they can't figure out how to move forward in a scene, whether they're drafting or they're in revision, the answer is in what came before, because that's where the emotional logic lies. So always go back maybe a chapter or two, or just on the book, but
It took me forever to learn that.
Yeah, it's in what came before. And if you can pick up those emotional threads and through lines, you can pull them forward. Still, to me, like when I do this in the revision, it looks like a hot, choppy mess. But eventually.
But the shitty first draft is a thing for a reason, and that's okay.
Yeah, and the second draft is a thing for a reason. And that is also okay.
Yeah.
Neither of them are polished or finished. Right?
Yeah.
Right on. So when you look back at your writing life, as a young writer, what kind of doubts did you struggle with? And now that you're more seasoned, what does it look like now? Has there been any change?
There's definitely been a change. I mean, my first dream as a young unpublished author was just to get published. I mean, just for me to be able to hold my book in my hand. That was all I wanted. And then once you achieve that, it lasts for a little while, but I guess it's like a drug. You need your next fix. So for me now, I would say my caution comes from like when I try new projects, like maybe something that's a different genre, or even just like if I'm taking, the violence in the Dance of the Elements series further than I had before, pushing other boundaries. It can be a scary thing. You want to make sure that the readers you do have are still happy and supportive of the words that you're creating. So I don't think that imposter syndrome or that fear ever goes away, but I do think that you yourself learn to manage it more.
And that's such a good point. When you're writing you're writing in a series, you have readership. And then if you decide to branch out and do something new, that's valid. That's valid. So it's a bit of a dance between like how far can I go with what I want and how do I honor my readership? But there's no cut right answer there, I don't think, at all. If there is one, if somebody knows it, please call in. Yeah, please email us. How important has reading been to your journey to learning the ins and outs of craft?
For me, integral. I cannot imagine a writer who is not a reader. To me, that just like my brain that doesn't make sense to me at all. I read voraciously. I'm one of those who's like, 150 books a year. Like, let's go. If I find a new author, a new series, I tend to binge read. It's probably why I haven't written as much of my own series. But I do stay up to date on from the business standpoint, I do try to stay up to date on what covers are currently going with the market, for the different genres and what is selling at the forefront, because it is important to be savvy and to know all that. But at the end of the day, I think I read for pleasure. So
I read for pleasure too. I would do it whether I was a writer or I wasn't writing, but
I'm here.
Read. And also, I think when you write, at least this has been my experience, when I decided to sit down and write a story, and then I decided that reading books was one of the best ways to teach myself how to do some of it. It ruined me as a reader in some way. It stopped me from fully inhabiting the experience.
Yeah.
So there's that. But still, I love it because sometimes I will find a book and it will just whisk me away on this amazing adventure. And sometimes my brain decides I don't want to be analytical and I just want to sink into the story and just be entertained. And
for sure.
But I just love that it has all of those facets. So I couldn't imagine not reading either. But maybe there's some people out there who are not big readers.
Right.
And they still do write. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just not my process. Okay, just a couple more questions before we wrap up. What do you think the best piece of writing advice is that you've ever received, that you've held on to?
I love that it fits into the theme of your podcast, which is, writing it scared. Don't be afraid of your shitty first draft. Literally, you can't be, because it is going to be shitty. That's the point. You can't edit a blank page. Like, there's so many of those that we hammer into young writers. And I think the point of it is because it's true. Like, you just have to go. It is a scary thing. It is a terrifying, gut-wrenching, vulnerable spilling thing to put your words into ink. And I will hold your hand while I say this. Have to do it.
So what is your wish for your fellow writers out there?
I would hope for writers to do everything in their power to make sure that their stories come out and find their readers. I mean, it's such a subjective art form that it's crazy because somebody's favorite book could be something that somebody else hated. You never know when you're going to find that person that just tells you that story that you wrote is exactly what I needed to read. And it could definitely happen. And all you need to do is put the words out because it can't happen if you don't write them. So I would just that everyone is staying brave and being fearless and putting yourself out there. And if you find that you're not in a situation where it's going to happen this way, find another. It didn't work with that agent. Find another. Didn't work with that publisher. Self-publish. Find something. You can do it.
I love that. So is there anything you're currently working on that you want to share? And then where can listeners find you?
You can find me on basically all of the socials under author A&Deese. My website is andeese.com, and there's all the links for all the things there as well. And I do have a super secret, not really secret, new project that's coming out. It is my first adult book that I have written. It is a open door fantasy romance, and it is spicy enough that we're doing a pen name so that the littles and my other readers and fans of A&Deese, there might be some crossover if you like sex with dragons. But if that's not your thing, I don't want you to stumble upon it. So that is coming out October 2025. It's called Fairy Bones and a Dragon's Eye, and that will be by Lexi Lopez. And yeah, I'm excited about that. I can't wait to find new readers and hopefully carry some of my old readers with me on a new journey.
I'm so excited for you and for that. Will it be a series or do you see it as a standalone?
It is a standalone, but I would say it's got series potential in that there are a lot of single friends of the main characters. And I do really like the world and the magic building that I'm creating in there. So I would love to visit it again. I've already got an idea of what my next couple would be, but it would kind of follow that format of while it is all in the same world and while there is some overlap, it would be a couple meets couple together. There isn't a poly relationship yet, but kind of sounded like there might be.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Alexis. It was awesome to talk to you. I'm excited for the last book in the Dance of the Elements series, and then for this new project under Lexi Lopez to come out into the world. So I will make sure to post all the links in the show notes where listeners can find you and readers too.
Perfect. Right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Scared podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And please leave a review. Reviews help other writers like you find the voices and messages they need to hear to continue to write their stories. Let's lift each other up. Remember, you can be scared and still be unstoppable. I'll see you next week.